right, so this is special for me because I love watching baseball. And I love hearing voices of baseball. People who've been around the game for a long time. Like baseball lifers, we call it. How you doing, sir? Martinez. Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Great. I got to ask you this off the bat, just for you. Been around baseball so long, being a baseball lifer, who are just some of your favorite players growing up?
Well, without question, my favorite player growing up was Willie Mays.
Okay.
I saw Willie play when I was 10 years old at Seal Stadium when the Giants first came to San Francisco, and I was struck right then with baseball and with Willie Mays. He was a terrific player. He was an exciting player, and it was my first major league game. And he was always my hero. And then when I got a chance to manage the World Baseball Classic in 2006, he was with us in Scottsdale quite a bit, so that was a big thrill for me as well.
We're going to get to that manager stuff because I got a fun question for you on that. But, obviously Willie Mays is a big influence for you. You start playing baseball. You've had some great teammates that you played with. One being particularly one of the best players of that generation, George Brett, right? Just for you, playing with a guy like George Brett, I think he doesn't get talked about enough amongst the baseball greats. Can you talk about what he meant for you as a teammate? And obviously he's won, he's done, I think it's the highest level.
George Brett and I were roommates, and we were together a lot in the minors. We came up in Kansas City. Actually, I came up in '69. He came up a couple years later. But one of the best players that ever played the game. He played hard. He played intense. He loved to play. He played with joy. And I'll never forget the comment he made was somebody asked him, George, how do you want to be remembered? He said, I want to be the guy, Dad's sitting in the stands, I hit a ground ball to second baseman, gets run up by half a step, and the dad says, that's the same way he started. He finished the same way he started.
I like that. So, former player turned manager. And, for me as a fan, never got anywhere close to being a major leaguer. We all got opinions on how to manage a team, what a manager should do. Can you talk about the difficulties of that? Because obviously you've done both.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's more challenging right now than it's ever been because of the analytical aspect of the game, where front offices have a lot to do with putting lineups together, putting rosters together, making in-game moves, pitching changes and pitch counts and everything else. I don't think it's ever been more challenging for a manager than it is right now in this game today. But they have so many outside influences, and they still have to make decisions based on what their 26 men are doing in the course of the day. And I think that gets lost. And, I admire people like Dusty Baker and Buck Showalter and Bruce Bochy, those guys that have done it so long and had so much success that they have been able to weather the transition from baseball old school to baseball analytics. And, it's still a wonderful game. It's still played by players. It's still played with heart and soul on the field. And if it were that easy, you could manufacture people in the analytics lab, and you can't do that.
I love that. So you talked about you and George being roommates and stuff, coming up together in the minors and different things like that. Today's game is just so different. What I mean by that is we're seeing guys get drafted, and all of a sudden, a couple months later, maybe less than a year, they're in the majors. Can you talk about, from just your days of playing baseball, seeing the young guys now come in the league? Well, not only just come in the league, some of these guys are like flourishing. Paul Skeens, for example, has come in and just instantly made an impact. Can you talk about that, and how do you feel about the game getting relatively younger and guys having to come in immediately make an impact?
You know what? It's happened before. There have been guys Bob Horner came right to the big leagues. Dave Winfield came to the big leagues. John Olerud came to the big leagues. It's just one of those things. David Clyde pitched out of high school and came to Texas Rangers.
Yeah,
so there's been situations where that's happened before. I think baseball has done a good job with evaluating guys like Wyatt Langford. He comes out of Florida, he's in the big leagues, and Bruce Bochy told me this a couple of days ago. He said, we probably pushed Langford a little bit more than we should have, but he's responded well. I'm a firm believer that you never are going to learn how to play Major League Baseball in the minor leagues. You have to play Major League Baseball in the major leagues to learn it. And we're pushing these guys quickly through the minor league system, and I think it's a good thing. The game is getting back to athleticism, and athletes are all over the field now. So I think you have to allow athletes to perform, and then have guys like Dusty Baker, Buck Showalter, Bruce Bochy mold them into big league players.
I like that. So I do this question called Mount Rushmore, and you've been, like I said, you're a baseball lifer. but we're going to have some fun with this one. Managers. If you did a Mount Rushmore, if you brought a young man to the Mount Rushmore of baseball, and you had to put 4 managers on that Mount Rushmore, who are your 4 managers?
Bobby Cox is first.
Okay.
Whitey Herzog would be second.
Okay.
Buck Showalter would be there.
Okay.
Dusty Baker would be there, and Bruce Bochy would be there.
So you got the 5 of the month. I like that. You got to do that. You got to do that. I like that. A few more questions. So obviously you're around this Toronto team. When we talk about baseball families, we got Bo, obviously Dante, Dad played, Vlad Jr. You're seeing their maturation. Can you talk about what you've seen from Vlad? Just, last year, a lot of people, that's somebody's great year. That was a down year for him, right? Considered a down year. But this year he's come back guns blazing, right? Can you talk about what you've seen from him? And what do you see in this Blue Jays team going forward?
Well, you know what? Vladdy had such a great year in 2021, and I think this year has been better for a number of reasons. First and foremost, in 2021, he had Bo Bichette driving in 100. He had Teoscar Hernandez driving in 100. He had Gurriel around him. There were good players up and down the lineup. This year, he's done it by himself. He's been basically the only slugger in the lineup all season long. Springer's had a down year. Bo's been hurt most of the year. So I think what Vladdy has done this year is even more remarkable than what he's done in 21. But as far as a player, this is Vladdy's team now. He has turned the corner. He's a leader. He understands the responsibility of being a leader. Plays every day. Plays with joy. Plays his heart out. And the sooner the Blue Jays sign him to extension, the happier everybody will be.
I love that, man. I got to ask you this, as a person that's involved in journalism, like I said, I love listening to Voices of Baseball. And when I think of Voices of Baseball, you come to mind. And I got to ask you this, do you remember your first game?
Not really. I remember my first couple of seasons, but
okay.
I don't remember my first game. I've been doing this since 1987, so there's a lot of games in between. But, games that have stood out for me, the Cal Ripken game when he broke Lou Gehrig's record. Chris Berman and I did that game. Jose Bautista hitting a first-inning home run off of Felix Hernandez for his 50th home run in a 1-0 win. Of course, the World Series in 92 and 93 with Joe Carter and Paul Molitor and Dave Stewart and Jack Morris and Robbie Alomar, and it was an amazing run. So, I don't really remember. I know there were a lot of rough games at the start, but we were able to smooth things out, and fortunately, I've been doing it a long time.
Cool. 2 more questions then. So, I got to ask you about their early 90s Blue Jays team, right? When we talk about baseball teams all the time, I can't think of too many teams that were well put together like that. The fact that you can go get a guy like David Cone to come along and join the ride later, right? Talk about John Olerud, young. He came up young, one of the better hitters of his time. Paul Molitor was on that team. You talked about Joe Carter, Roberto Alomar, one of the best second basemen of all time. Can you talk about those teams and how people seemingly forget how great they were? I think when we talk about all-time teams, you hear about the Big Red Machine, as you should. You hear about the Murderous Row, the Yankees. You hear about a lot of those teams, but you don't really hear about the Blue Jays team that I thought had an amazing run during that time.
Yeah, it all started when Bobby Cox came to manage the Blue Jays in 1982. Pat Gillick was the Hall of Fame general manager, and the team got better. We won for the first time in 85, and then 86 was a great season, but a disappointing finish. 87 was a horrible finish, losing the last 7 games. But they built up to that point. Hal McRae used to tell me all the time, and he told this to several teams. He said, the White Sox, for instance, in 1977 were the White Sox and all of that. Well, they beat us pretty bad in Chicago early in September, and they had some great players, including Ralph Garr. And what they thought was that they were going to win the division. And Hal McRae told them, around the batting cage, mind you, this is unbelievable. He says, Gator, you guys can't win. You got to knock on the door before you can break in. So we went back to Kansas City, swept them in a 3-game series. They were done for the season. We won for the 2nd year in a row. But you have to knock on the door, and that's what the Blue Jays in 92 and 93 did. They went to the postseason before. And you're right, when they brought in Jack Morris after the 91 performance in Game 7 against Atlanta, when he committed to Toronto, that kind of validated who the Blue Jays were at that point. And then they just kind of ran with it. And then they brought in Molitor and Winfield and Ricky Henderson and David Cone. And you forget how many great players were on those 2 teams. And to dominate World Series in back-to-back seasons was pretty special. But the organization was deep with talent. The organization had a wonderful manager and a great GM. And I think there's a lot of Canadian fans that remember those wonderful years in 92 and 93.
Love it. Last question. Two players come to mind for me from a generational standpoint, and these are two pitchers. And obviously you covered them. You did play-by-play for their games. I just want you to briefly talk about both of these two guys. Roy Halladay. Rest in peace to Roy Halladay. And Roger Clemens. You got that small run of Roger Clemens there too. Cy Young, by the way, on both of those guys. Can you talk about just what you saw from those two? Because those, to me, for my generation, two of the best pitchers I ever seen.
Yeah, Roy Halladay was pitching for me in 2001 in spring training, and he was just getting hammered in spring training. And I'm sitting with my pitching coach, Mark Connor, and I said, Goose, we got to do something with this guy. He's too good to waste. He throws 97 over the top. At the time, he was throwing a knuckle curveball, and he couldn't land it very consistently. So Gord Ash was the general manager. We called him in the office in spring training. Says, Doc, we're going to send you to the minor leagues. We're going to send you down to A-ball, and you're going to start over. And we want you to pitch without any numbers, without any pressure. Just get back to throwing strikes. And what happened was, and it didn't happen in Dunedin, it happened in Double-A when we promoted him. He got with a pitching coach, and it was just an amazing transition. And the pitching coach made a move and says, Roy, I want you to throw sidearm. And that's the delivery that he got into when he finally came back. He was a high three-quarter pitcher, and he pounded the strike zone. He shelved his knuckle curveball, had a slider and a split and a fastball, and he was off and running. Pitched himself into the Hall of Fame.
A legend. And then, of course, Roger Clemens.
Well, Clemens came to us after Boston thought his career was over.
Yeah.
And he won 2 Cy Youngs in, I believe, 97 and 98. And the one thing I tell young pitchers all the time, when Roger Clemens got you to 2 strikes, you were out. If you were 6, 7, 8, 9 in the lineup, 0-2, you were out. The next pitch was a pitch of decision. And that's what Roger did so well. When he got a pitcher, when he got a hitter in a vulnerable position, he stepped on his throat. And he was terrific at that. He knew he had to save his bullets for the top of the order. So he didn't mess around with 6, 7, 8, 9. He didn't mess around with the Buck Martinez's of the lineup. He went right after him. And then what he did was he handled the top of the order with finesse, with pizzazz, and he was a tremendous pitcher. And unfortunately, he's not in the Hall of Fame because of his history, obviously, of what happened. But he was a tremendous pitcher and a great competitor.
Well, this is a great interview. This is a great thing for me. And people ask me all the time, my Mount Rushmore is the thing. Somebody asked me, baseball voices, you're my Mount Rushmore. I want to say that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for what you've done for baseball. Continue to do for baseball as well. We're going to have to do this again, obviously, next year. You'll be back here. We may have to make a trip up north and make this happen because I got some more fun questions for you.
All right.
Martinez, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you.